These 10 movies lost a combined $50 million in theaters. Exposed budgets, empty seats, studio executives pretending they never greenlit the thing. I've got Mike Judge getting sabotaged by his own studio. I've got a Zucker Brothers comedy that Paramount tried to bury out of spite. And one film that made $295,000 total, then launched the careers of half the people you see in comedies today. Here's the thing though, every single one of these bombs turned out to be funnier than the hits that beat them. Let's find out why. The Zucker Brothers made Airplane and The Naked Gun, two of the funniest movies ever produced. So when their protege Pat Proft wrote Brain Donors as a love letter to the Marx Brothers, Paramount should have rolled out the red carpet. They didn't. They tried to destroy it. Brain Donors cost somewhere around $10 million to produce. That's a modest budget, even for 1992. You'd think Paramount would give it a real marketing push, considering the Zucker name was basically a license to print money at the time. Instead, the studio changed the title from the original Lame Ducks, refused to screen it for critics, and dumped it into 523 theaters with zero advertising. It made $504,000 total, not opening weekend, total. Here's where it gets interesting. Paramount did this on purpose. The Zucker Brothers had just left the studio when their contract expired, and the suits were furious. The LA Times described the release strategy as deliberate dumping. They essentially punished the movie for existing. John Turturro, who plays the lead with the energy of a man possessed by Groucho Marx's ghost, delivers what fans call 20 good laughs per minute. The ballet finale rivals anything the actual Marx Brothers ever did. But nobody saw it because a studio threw a tantrum. Brain Donors found its audience through VHS rentals and word of mouth among comedy nerds. The closing claymation sequences were created by Will Vinton, the guy who made the California Raisins. The score was done by Mark Mothersbaugh of Devo. This wasn't some thrown-together cheapie. Real talent was involved at every level. It got a Blu-ray release in 2016 after years of fan petitioning. If you've never heard of it, that's exactly the point. Paramount made sure of that. Speaking of movies that never got a fair chance, Michael Jai White spent $2.9 million making Black Dynamite, a blaxploitation parody so perfectly crafted, it makes Austin Powers look lazy. The studio gave it 70 theaters. 70. For 2 weeks. It grossed $242,578 domestically. That's not a typo. For context, the average movie ticket in 2009 was about $8. That means roughly 30,000 people saw this in theaters across the entire country. But here's the thing, Black Dynamite has an 83% on Rotten Tomatoes. It won the Golden Space Needle Audience Award at the Seattle International Film Festival, beating The Hurt Locker. The film was shot in just 20 days on vintage Super 16 film stock to nail the grainy 1970s look. The deliberate mistakes are genius. Boom mics visible in frame, actors reading stage directions out loud, mismatched stunt doubles that are clearly different people. And the plot escalates from street crime to a kung fu fight with the president in the Oval Office. O.O. Scott of the New York Times dismissed it as better suited to a 5-minute clip on YouTube. White's response? Well, obviously A.O. stands for another word entirely because we're still talking about it. He wasn't wrong. Black Dynamite spawned a 2-season animated series on Adult Swim. It's the definition of a movie that outlived its own box office. This next one actually had real money behind it. Paramount gave The Lonely Island $25 million and Lorne Michaels as producer to make Hot Rod, Andy Samberg's feature debut. That's more than what Superbad cost. Break Even was somewhere around $60 million with marketing. It opened at $5.3 million, finished with $13.9 million worldwide. Paramount lost roughly $11 million. You'd think a movie produced by the guy behind Saturday Night Live would at least get a fair shot. But Hot Rod had problems from the start. The script was originally written for Will Ferrell, who dropped out due to scheduling. Complete rewrites followed. Samberg later admitted Paramount wanted them to make Dodgeball, but they made something much weirder. A stuntman broke his leg on the very first stunt filmed, and it opened the same summer as Superbad and Knocked Up. 2 massive hits that made everything else look invisible. Here's what nobody expected. Roger Ebert gave it a thumbs up. The AV Club later wrote that The Lonely Island's comedy rhythms were unpredictable and exciting, like a dog whistle for hardcore comedy devotees. The Cool Beans scene was nearly cut from the film, but tested through the roof with audiences. Director Akiva Schaffer once said his dream for the movie was that it would just end up on a Sunday afternoon with commercial breaks, where it just becomes a little part of your life. That's exactly what happened. Bill Hader and Danny McBride both credit this as a career launcher. Isla Fisher and Will Arnett round out a cast that's absurdly stacked for a movie nobody saw. It became a staple on Netflix and is now one of the most quoted comedies of the 2000s. Paramount just had no idea what they had. Here's one that actually looked promising on paper. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil cost $5 million and premiered at Sundance in January 2010. Sold out crowds. Great buzz. Then it spent the next 18 months looking for someone willing to put it in theaters. When it finally got a US release in September 2011, it played in 44 theaters. It made $224,000 domestically. The film actually recouped its budget through international sales, but in America, it was basically invisible. The premise is the kind of thing that makes you wonder why nobody thought of it sooner. Two lovable hillbillies buy a vacation cabin. A group of college kids assumes they're deranged backwoods criminals. Every time someone accidentally gets hurt, the kids think Tucker and Dale did it. The wood chipper scene alone is worth the price of admission. Alan Tudyk and Tyler Labine have the best buddy chemistry in any comedy that decade. It sits at 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, certified fresh. The critics' consensus calls it a film that mines its central crazy joke for incredible scares, laughs, and believe it or not, heart. Director Eli Craig has talked openly about how the box office stigma killed any chance of a sequel. Warner Brothers reportedly blocked Tucker and Dale Go to Yale from happening. A TV series was also killed before it started. Fans are still campaigning as of 2025. I was honestly rooting for this one to break through. The fact that it never did says more about distribution than quality. And then there's the one that set a record nobody wanted. MacGruber became the lowest-grossing widely released SNL movie ever made. That's a category that includes It's Pat and The Ladies' Man. Think about how bad you have to bomb to finish below those. Universal spent $10 million on it. It opened at $4 million and finished with $8.5 million worldwide. By week 3, it had lost 94% of its screens, dropping from 2,546 theaters to 177. CinemaScore gave it a C-, which is basically audiences saying, "I want my money back." The problem was structural. The original SNL sketches ran 45 to 90 seconds. That's the joke. MacGruber can't defuse the bomb in time. Stretching that to 90 minutes confused everyone who wasn't already a superfan. It opened the same weekend as Shrek Forever After, which pulled $70 million. And the MacGyver reference felt dated since the original show ended in 1992. But here's what nobody could have predicted. Christopher Nolan became MacGruber's biggest celebrity fan. He quoted the film on the set of The Dark Knight Rises. When the MacGruber TV series went into production at Peacock in 2021, Nolan sent an email for the table read that said his "spirit soars with you." Will Forte admitted the initial bombing was devastating, but eventually decided he didn't care because they made the movie they wanted. The Peacock series brought back the entire original cast plus Sam Elliott and Lawrence Fishburne. Sometimes bombing just means you were early. But that's nothing compared to the financial crater Judd Apatow dug with Walk Hard. This was supposed to be the big holiday comedy of December 2007. Columbia Pictures gave it $35 million. John C. Reilly, starring as a fictional music legend in a parody of every Ernest biopic ever made. Break even was probably north of $80 million. It opened Christmas weekend at $4.1 million, 9th place. It finished with $18.3 million domestically. Sony was staring at roughly $15 million in losses. This was Apatow's biggest flop as a producer by a wide margin. The timing couldn't have been worse. Walk Hard opened against National Treasure, Book of Secrets, and Alvin and the Chipmunks. Families chose treasure hunting and singing rodents over a rated R music parody. Spoof fatigue had set in after years of scary movie knockoffs diluting the genre. Despite an expensive Cox Across America promotional tour with Riley performing in character at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and on Good Morning America, tracking numbers were dismal before the first ticket was sold. Here's the wild part. Walk Hard essentially killed the Ernest music biopic. Every single one that came after it, Bohemian Rhapsody, Elvis, Rocketman, gets unfavorably compared to Dewey Cox. Weird, the Al Yankovic story was directly inspired by its approach. Tim Meadows telling Dewey, "You don't want no part of this," about every substance known to man, became an instant classic scene. The Beatles parody with Paul Rudd as John Lennon, Jack Black as Paul McCartney, Justin Long as George Harrison, and Jason Schwartzman as Ringo remains endlessly quotable. John C. Reilly sang all his own songs, and Beautiful Ride has reportedly been played at actual weddings and funerals. The movie made $15 million in DVD sales alone. It didn't need theaters, it needed time. This one's almost hard to believe. Wet Hot American Summer was made for $1.8 million and grossed $295,206 total worldwide. The distributor, USA Films, paid the filmmakers $100,000 for the rights and then did essentially nothing. 2 theaters on opening weekend. It never expanded beyond 30 cities. For context, that $295,000 gross means fewer people saw this in theaters than attend a single NFL game. The investors lost roughly $1.5 million. Co-writer Michael Showalter later said the marketing pitched it as just another big ensemble comedy, which completely missed the point. It's not a camp movie. It's a deconstruction of camp movies. You'd think a film this ignored would just disappear. Instead, look at the cast list. Bradley Cooper in his film debut, Amy Poehler, Paul Rudd, Elizabeth Banks, Christopher Maloney, David Hyde Pierce, Molly Shannon. Half the people in modern comedy got their start in a movie that made less than $300,000. Paul Rudd later admitted he wasn't sure he ever got paid because the budget was so small they might have forgotten to write him a check. Owen Gleiberman at Entertainment Weekly gave it an A and named it one of the 10 best films of the year. Roger Ebert gave it 1 star. That split tells you everything about this movie. Either you get it or you don't. Showalter's litmus test became famous. If you were on a date with somebody and they didn't like Wet Hot, you know it's not going to go well. Netflix made 2 sequel series. Pro wrestler Orange Cassidy based his entire persona on Paul Rudd's character. It's the comedy that refused to stay buried. Here's one that actually had a real budget and a real cast and still managed to faceplant. Paramount spent $15 million on Clue, an ensemble comedy based on the board game starring Tim Curry, Madeline Kahn, Christopher Lloyd, and Michael McKean. It made $14.6 million. A modest loss on paper, but significantly worse once you factor in marketing. The gimmick was supposed to be brilliant. Different theaters showed different endings. Ending A, B, or C. John Landis figured audiences would pay to see it multiple times. They didn't. Gene Siskel called it exactly what it was. A gimmick that distracted from the movie itself. It opened against Rocky IV, The Color Purple, Spies Like Us, and Out of Africa. The Christmas 1985 schedule was absolutely stacked, but that's not the whole story. Carrie Fisher was originally cast as Miss Scarlet, but entered rehab a week before filming. Tom Stoppard, one of the greatest playwrights alive, spent a year writing a draft of the screenplay, then gave up and returned all his money. Rowan Atkinson was the second choice for Wadsworth, but was deemed not big enough for American audiences. Tim Curry was the third choice. He delivered one of the greatest comedy performances in film history. Madeline Kahn's Flames monologue was completely improvised. Jonathan Lynn screened his Girl Friday for the entire cast as inspiration for the rapid-fire dialogue pacing. They rehearsed the entire film like a stage play before cameras rolled, which is why the dialogue crackles like nothing else from that era. Tim Curry's frantic reenactment of the entire evening in the finale is routinely cited as one of the greatest comedy sequences ever filmed. HBO and Comedy Central airings built the cult, following through the late 80s and 90s. Now Clue has shadow cast performances at art house theaters, just like Rocky Horror. Its 40th anniversary in 2025 featured 3-day theatrical screenings showing different endings each day. Turns out the gimmick works great when you're not competing with Rocky Balboa. Mike Judge made Office Space and got burned by Fox. Then he made Idiocracy, and Fox didn't just burn him. They tried to make the movie disappear entirely. This might be the most deliberate act of studio sabotage in modern Hollywood history. Idiocracy cost $2.4 million. Fox released it with no trailer, no TV ads, no press kits, no critic screenings. 2 still images were the entirety of the marketing materials. At its widest, it played in 130 theaters. The standard for a wide release is 600. After 1 week, Fox pulled it from most locations. Total domestic gross, $444,093. There's a reason Fox wanted this buried, and it's not what you'd expect. Terry Crews revealed that real advertisers, including major brands, had invested in the film expecting positive product placement. When they saw the finished product, which savagely satirizes corporate America and consumer culture, they were shocked. Many believe Fox feared losing advertising partnerships. Starbucks, Costco, and Carl's Jr. are all ruthlessly mocked. Fox essentially chose their ad revenue over the movie. DVD rentals earned $9 million. That's more than 20 times the theatrical gross. Judge himself said Fox expected the film to develop a cult following through home video, the same way Office Space did. Except with Office Space, they at least tried. With Idiocracy, they actively prevented people from seeing it. I actually assumed Idiocracy was already a hit before I looked up the numbers because everyone I know has seen it. Terry Crews as President Camacho became an iconic character people reference during every election cycle. Brondo, it's got electrolytes, entered the cultural vocabulary. A real Brondo energy drink was manufactured after the film's release. People don't even call it a comedy anymore. They call it a documentary. Judge knew exactly what he was making. Fox just wasn't ready to hear it. And that brings us to the biggest comedy bomb turned cultural institution of them all. Office Space cost Fox $10 million. Mike Judge directing, Ron Livingston, Jennifer Aniston, Gary Cole, Stephen Root, a satire of cubicle culture based on Judge's animated Milton shorts from the early 90s. Fox dumped it in February, the graveyard of release months. It opened at $4.2 million. 8th place, lost to Payback's third weekend. After 3 weeks, Fox pulled it from 75% of its screens. Final worldwide gross, $10.8 million. Barely broke even before marketing costs, which means it technically lost money. Fox never understood what Judge was doing. Executives clashed with him constantly during production. Judge had worked mind-numbing office jobs before getting into entertainment, including 8 hours a day alphabetizing purchase orders. Everything in the script came from real experience. Despite some creative marketing, including putting a man in a glass cubicle in Times Square, nobody showed up. The comedy landscape in February 1999 just wasn't built for a quiet, deadpan workplace satire. Audiences wanted big and loud. Judge gave them small and devastating. Then Comedy Central started airing it on August 5, 2001. Everything changed. Over 1 million viewers tuned in for the first broadcast. DVD sales exploded past 6 million copies. TPS reports entered the business vocabulary. Gary Cole's Bill Lumbergh became the definitive bad boss in American pop culture. Here's a detail that still blows my mind. The red swingline stapler Milton obsesses over? It didn't exist. The prop department painted a regular stapler red. After the cult following took off, Swingline started manufacturing red staplers in April 2002. It's now their most popular product. A fictional prop created real consumer demand. NBC offered Judge the chance to develop the American version of The Office after seeing what he'd done with cubicle humor. He passed. The movie that Fox threw away became the template for the most successful sitcom of the 2000s. Every single one of these movies was too weird, too smart, or too poorly marketed for theaters. Studios either didn't know what they had, didn't care, or actively tried to bury the evidence. And every single one outlived the hits that beat them. The real lesson here isn't about box office numbers. It's that theatrical performance is maybe the worst possible way to measure whether a comedy actually works. Comedies need time. They need repeat viewings. They need someone handing a DVD to a friend and saying, "Trust me, just watch it." That doesn't happen on opening weekend. It happens at 2 in the morning on a random Tuesday when you stumble across something on streaming that changes the way you think about what's funny. I'm calling it now. The next comedy classic is probably bombing in theaters right now and nobody's paying attention. Give it 10 years.